This same time last week, I stood right here, had a taste of my third batch, and I had a very big problem. I couldn't taste shit. What do you do then in a situation like that? And that is what I wanted to discuss in this video, how I overcame that impairment to correct a batch of pho. Basically blind, took a stab in the dark, and it still came out correct. I wasn't gonna make this video today, but since the culprit's here, I'm gonna shoot this intro with the person who gave me COVID. So it finally happened to me. I caught COVID, but I'm better now. That explains my absence for the last few weeks. And in this video, I wanted to discuss one effect that COVID had on me. I experienced a total loss of taste and smell. As a chef, your sense of taste is actually very important. My whole business here relies on me being able to taste. Without it, that's a very big problem. And I faced that problem this time last week when I was cooking my Saturday batch of pho behind me. I winged it. I couldn't taste jack, yet I still managed to season it correctly. And the answer to how I did it actually lies in this little container in front of me. So how exactly did I catch COVID? I don't really know, although my last video was with Noah. We hung out Sunday afternoon, he was coughing, and yeah, the next day I wasn't feeling too well.
Are you sick, man?
No.
I'm starting to feel sick.
No.
I'm gonna catch it from you.
No, I have asthma.
No, you don't.
I do.
No, you don't.
No, what do I have then?
I think you've got COVID.
No, I had a COVID test yesterday.
How did you go?
But I was negative.
A few days later, someone told me, you better do a rat test. And I did it for the first time. Getting that swab right up my nose, it got me all teary, and it came back negative. And I showed everyone, I said, see, I knew it, I'm not COVID positive. But in fact, I was, because I was reading the results wrong. For some reason, I read somewhere that if you get 2 lines and that second line is faint, it means I'm negative, when in fact I was positive. So I had to go straight home. I sat it out for a week, and during that time I developed a total loss of taste and smell, and they usually go hand in hand together. I actually started to freak out because as a chef, people come here to my store because the food tastes good, and the big reason why it tastes good is the chef has a good sense of taste. And all of a sudden I lost this skill, this ability to taste and gauge where the food is at. All of a sudden I started to panic. Started doing the WebMD stuff where I googled, does your sense of taste come back after catching COVID? And all sorts of keywords like that. Yeah, it didn't come back, but came Saturday, I tested negative, and it so happens we ran out of pho and I had to cook a big batch. And normally I'm very confident when I'm cooking pho, but that day I threw in all the seasoning like I usually do. And then when it came to the final taste test, yeah, that's when it didn't go according to plan, and I was praying my sense of taste came back by the time I had that taste of the spoon, but it didn't. And I stood over there. What do I do now? And I basically had to season that batch, taking a stab in the dark and just using this thing chefs called feelings, where if you've done it that way, you got to trust yourself that what you put in, your pre-seasoning, your final adjustment seasoning is correct. And I remembered an old trick that I used to do right at the very beginning when I first started cooking soups and pho. And what that involved was, whenever I finally got the taste right, where I cooked a batch which I considered the best I've ever done, what I used to do is get a little container like this. I'd put a sample of it in, I'd put a stick on it, and I'd label it and date it and put it in the freezer, so that whenever I came across the same situation where I didn't know where I was at, I could just take this out of the freezer and have a taste of the good batch and compare it with my current batch, just to gauge where I'm at or how far I'm off. And that was a tip that I wanted to share, because that actually got me out of trouble this time last week. I probably could only taste about 20% of my usual capacity, but that was enough for me to realize that it was pretty close. My previous batch was a little bit sweeter, but I remember I put a little bit too much caster sugar at the end of that batch, which is why there was a bit of a difference. But overall, my instincts kicked in and I said, yes, it tastes correct. And I ended up cooking a very good batch of pho, because during the week when my sense of taste came back, I had a taste and it was very good. And it shows too, because customers out there in the dining area, they drank up all the broth, which says to me that it is a very good batch. So very simple tip, save a sample. Even if it wasn't something that you cooked, if you go to a restaurant and you found the broth is very good, just save it. Save a sample, put it in the freezer, because you never know when you're going to need it. And I have discussed this in my previous videos, where I'm like the broth collector. Bún bò, from me, it is the best that I've ever cooked, and I saved a sample in a container along with many other samples. I've got a lot of samples of pho in my freezer from all sorts of places. This one is all the way from Hanoi. This was given to me by my ex-partner. When she went over there, she brought me a whole heap of samples, and somehow she got it here. I actually never tasted this one. I'm not too sure where this was from, but my point is, I like to collect broths. I usually put them in a small container like this, and every now and then when I'm cooking a batch, I just like to taste a very good one and just to see how far off I am. I get thrills out of that. And now, doing it for so long, there are times when I look back at, say, Pho An in Sydney, which to me is still my all-time favourite pho. I taste that, then I taste mine, and it brings a smile to my face, because it just shows how far I've come with my seasoning game. The second thing I wanted to discuss today, which relates to this good broth sample here, is, you'll notice behind me I've got a small pot followed by a larger pot, and then right at the end is my 150 litre 311. And in this store, not all my soups I cook in big batches. I cook my bún riêu, and it's only 5 litres at a time. But the point I wanted to make is, the smaller the batch, the better chance you have of getting the taste correct. And this goes back to an earlier comment where someone mentioned the internet for a recipe that I've shared on this channel, probably their biggest gripe with it is the yield, or how much is produced is only 3 liters, which isn't nearly enough for their big family. And I get that. And the reason why I deliberately kept that recipe small is your chances or your luck increases dramatically when you cook a smaller batch over a big batch. The story here, I actually started with a very small pot, and slowly I progressed to the 311 behind me. And the true story is I had that 311 long before I even started using it to cook my pho, because I was very scared cooking a batch that big. It just goes back to the point where someone made, where they commented, they asked if I wanted to double my recipe, is it just a matter of, you know, doubling the volume, doubling the seasoning? And the funny thing about that is, it is, but it isn't as well. You can't just double everything and expect it to taste right. You're still going to make minor corrections here and there. And in my extensive recipe collection, I started with a small batch, and when I look back now, it isn't just a matter of doubling everything and hoping for the best. And this is where this little sample comes in handy for this situation as well. So if you wanted to double your recipe, or triple or quadruple, sky's the limit really. All you really need is a reference point, which goes back to this little container that you should keep. Because if you've done it correctly once, and next time if you're doubling that recipe and you're tasting it and it's not quite right, it's very easy, because all you need to do is refer back to this. You can almost call this the Google map for taste. You know, if you're lost, you need directions, you whip out this and you can find your way to your destination. And that is it for today's video. If you like my style, make sure to subscribe, give it a like, drop a comment. I'll see you guys in my next video.